Hi, everybody. Thank you for the possibility to share with you some of the working that we are doing within the co-op project regarding fuzzy cognitive maps. And so I will start with maybe I will start, yes, with a general overview of this talk. So I will give you a general introduction about the co-op project. It will be very brief because probably you already know. Then I will focus on the work package 1 of co-op because it's the one led by University of Liverpool in which I'm working. We will see a bit of the methodology that we are using, some preliminary learnings, and then I will show you the next steps. So co-op is probably you already know, one of the SMMR funded projects in which we want to develop this new integrated and transdisciplinary system-based framework that will hopefully effectively support the transition for hard gray solution to softer green solution in the coastal and shoreline management. As you can see on the left, the project is articulated in 4 work packages. And as I mentioned before, I will focus on the first one, in which our aim is to define the constituent parts of a generic UK coastal social ecological system. And yeah, just to give you a bit of an overview, we started to do this work organizing a scoping workshop during which we wanted to collect data about these components of this generic coastal social ecological system, taking in mind a focus on resilience to flooding and erosion risk. Here you can see some of the definition, because yesterday we mentioned that definitions are important. Please don't ask me the definition of resilience. This is just a working definition for us. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. So what we mean by social ecological system, so we mean the human and natural elements of the system that we are studying, the interaction between them and the key drivers that can cause change in that system. Regarding resilience, the definition that we gave during the scoping workshop was the ability to withstand and bounce back from disturbance, always taking in mind the resilience of coastal system to flooding and erosion. And yeah, we asked participants to think about the next 5 to 10 years. And the method that we used for this work and that we are using is the fuzzy cognitive mapping approach, because this allows us to bring together the knowledge of many minds and many stakeholders of what a system or a situation looks like. And yeah, so going more in depth of the methodology that we used during the scoping workshop, we involved a range of different stakeholders because we wanted to have an idea of different perceptions of the UK social ecological systems. You can see in there the organization that we involved. Then we divide participants in those 3 groups. And during the workshop, we had 3 main steps. In the first one, we asked participants to think about which are the features that can have an influence on erosion and flooding risk that you can see in there as orange boxes in the middle. The blue boxes represent the features here called nodes of the natural system, while the yellow ones are the human system ones. Then the second step was to add drivers. So what can we ask to participants? What could bring change to these human and natural nodes? And the first step was to ask them, what do you think interacts with what? So could be that a driver influences a node, a natural or a human node, or drivers interacting with each other. And they could indicate to us this interaction using these arrows and just saying if, according to them, it was a positive or a negative interaction. So although it was a half-day workshop, online workshop, unfortunately, due to the COVID stuff, we ran out of time, obviously. And then we decided that we were not really satisfied with the data that we collected. So we started this kind of asynchronous and iterative process with them. So we asked them to revise the list of nodes and drivers that they indicated to us. Then we created that kind of tidy map, one for each group, just to start with. And during meetings that were one by one or with subgroups, we had them to add interactions, or actually they were also allowed to change the nodes and drivers that they were in the map. So here you can see some of our results. We have 11 of these great maps. Here you can see only 8 of them, but I think you can see in the middle, we always have the erosion and flooding risk in the middle, and all the other nodes and drivers that, according to them, can influence those risks. And I want to highlight in here that the starting point of all these maps were that kind of tidy maps that I showed you before. And I think this is important because it can show us how our individual view of the system can be very different for the very same system. So now I wanted to share you just an example of a more in-depth example of, sorry for the heading, I don't know what happened, but just an example of this kind of individual view of the system, because in this case, this person started with the erosion risk and the flooding risk, but then according to him, you need to define the risk as the probability multiplied by the value of assets for both the risk. And this means that you have features, you have nodes influencing one or the other or both. And it's a kind of more complex, if we want to say, view of the risk. And it was the only one suggesting this view. And I think it could also be of interest for this audience, his definition of resilience. So is the capacity of adapting to. So according to him, the more you are used to be flooded, for example, the more resilient you are, because you already know what to do, basically. Hopefully this example and the previous messy maps gave you a sense of the complexity of the system and the difference that we can have in terms of individual view of the system. And although it's this iterative process that we are still doing with stakeholders, obviously is very time consuming. But we are actually seeing a mutual learning process going on in parallel with the data that we are collecting. And so here you can see 3 quotes from the work that we have been doing together with stakeholders. And actually the first one is my favorite one, because this guy started off being really quiet as she struggled with it, and I found it deeply uncomfortable. And I have to say that it was a mutual feeling. And so I'm sure you were sort of sitting there smiling over these geomorphologists, these scientists struggling with the social aspect of this, but it's been illuminating as we have gone through. And apart from the fact that we were so glad, given that we struggled a lot as well, it seems that giving the possibility to people to interact, not only one time, gives also the possibility to change their mind, to be more open to different views, because they come in contact with views of different people, with different input, with different background. I guess at this point, I guess the real question is, this is all great, but why should we care about all this stuff? So which is the value? And I think the third quote is a great assist to answer to this question, because this lady mentioned that we have such a fixed perception of our own circumstances and your own connection, your own way that you see problems and issues, and somebody else sees it in a very different way based on their experience. So it's really good to bring it all together. So given that our individual perception can have perceptions and values actually can have an influence in the decision-making process, I think that the value of this work could be to try to put together different stakeholders' view and trying to give a more holistic view for decision-making process. And then very quickly, next steps, we are going to aggregate all these 11 maps into 3, one for each group. Then we will do some analysis looking for commonalities and differences, and we will be communicating, disseminating results through an infographic and a paper. And with my favorite quote from Helen Keller, that is then, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. I want to thank all of you for listening.
Thank you, Marta. That was really interesting, and just, I guess, shows the journey is sometimes as important as where you're going to.